Hey guys, and welcome back to Betwixt the Books. We are just going to do a chatty video today. We wanted to check in on some of our reading goals for the year as we're just about to go into Q4, the last quarter of the year, see if we have been keeping up with those or not. If you haven't seen them as they come up, we will point to other videos that sort of talk about when we were setting these goals back from the beginning of the year, and you want to go see what they are, because I think that we do have some interesting reading challenges that we both set for ourselves that might be interesting for you to do when you're thinking of your goal setting for next year, possibly. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about whether or not we'll keep doing these later in the year, because you'll hear about whether those challenges were successful at the very end of the year / the beginning of next year, and whether or not we're going to continue them there. But at least at this point, we have 3.5-ish months left of the year, so let's check in and see if we're at least on track to meet those goals.
The answer is no. Not here. Not me. So the first one that we wanted to talk about was just like the overall, the reading goal, I guess, of like a lot of people set this. You can do it on Goodreads, you can do it on Storygraph, you could do it just for yourself. Just it always asks you at the beginning of the year, like, how many books do you want to try to read this year? I always set mine at 100. There have been a good many years in a row that I have read way more than 100. There were a couple of years where I topped 200 books in a year. And so my standard has been to hit 100 for literally no reason other than that just is the number that I've chosen. I know some people choose these using actual thought processes. I don't. Um, because I always read a lot, the number of things that I read not super concerning to me. And also, one thing that I'm trying to remind myself when I reveal how far away I am from 100 this year is that as a PhD student, I do a lot of things that I'm reading, but they don't count on things like Goodreads or Storygraph, right? And this could be true for you too if you read like web comics or like Michaela has to track her own fan fiction. Um, but I read, especially because I'm working on my dissertation, I've probably read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of scholarly articles and books. And there's like a book right next to my head over here that's literally this big that I need to kind of like read some chapters out of. Um, all to say that at this point, according to Storygraph, I have read 41 books this year. Um, I have regularly, most years, done 41 books basically in 2 months. Particularly for whatever reason, May usually is like an incredible month for me where I like put away like 20 to 25 books. Because if you have a Storygraph account, it will tell you that, and that's incredible. Um, but yeah, I'm not like I guess self-conscious about it, but I am feeling a little bit weird about it just because it's like so low for me. But this has been a really bad year for my mental health. And so yeah, I'm just trying to I didn't choose that number for any reason. I am not a better or worse person if I don't meet it. Um, and so if you need to remind yourself like, hey, sometimes because if I put any pressure on myself to try to read like 55, 60 books it's not going to happen. I am accepting that this goal is going to go unmet. So that's that's where I am on that
um Sort of the opposite for me. I traditionally set my reading goal at about 20 or 25 books, or at least have for the last couple of years. I was doing, I think, the traditional like 50 when it was Goodreads that was picking, because I think Goodreads like automatically sets to 50. I know you can change it to other ones. But for me, I had been setting it lower. I, in the past several years, had not been reading very much outside of the books that we read for the channel together, and that usually was about 20 or 25 books for the year. Um, this year, I decided to, because I was unemployed, so I have more time to read, to set it to try and read at least one book a year. Not a year. One book a week. Would have been wild to set it to one book a year. I only have to read one book in the whole year. Nailed it. No. I'm a little bit ahead on that goal. I've read 39 books. So even though Gretchen's upset about how much she's reading, she's still read more books than I have this year. But yes, I'm at 39, which according to Storygraph is 3 books ahead of the 1 book a week goal. That may change because sometimes there's just a time when I like go several weeks without reading, and then other times there's a week where I read like 3 books in 2 days. Just whether or not my brain wants to read. And again, that's just books. Gretchen mentioned it, but I regularly read over 1 million words of fan fiction every single month. And if you put that into book terms, it's like 12-ish books a month of fan fiction length. So I read a lot. It's just not it's just not trackable book in that way. So yes, like I do think that if I was reading the same amount of content of books as I do of fan fiction, I would probably be reading about the same amount of content that Gretchen normally reads in book form. But yeah, I just do it about 2 Blorbos kissing in the 80s. It's fine. Don't worry
Well, but
about
like this
it.
is my question too, right? I feel like the more and more we kind of diversify what we're doing,
Yeah.
it's harder and harder to track too, because like I traditionally listen to my nonfiction on audiobook.
Yeah.
Now, at a certain like I understand there are genre differences, like whatever, that's not my point. At in terms of like listening to knowledge, right? If I added all the podcasts that I've listened to this year, I
Right.
have read over
Yep.
100 books,
Yep.
right? Because like a solid series podcast is about the length of an audiobook,
Yeah.
right? If you think like every episode is an hour, generally, I mean not always, but like, there's like 8 to 10 episodes. I mean
Yeah.
that's book,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
In which case, I'm fine. Like
Yeah.
we're rolling into Happy City here. Um,
It's
but
just not
like,
trackable. Yeah.
yeah, it's not trackable. And like, I feel like for whatever reason, if you were like, oh yeah, I read 10, 10 podcast books,
Yep.
like,
Yep.
like it's also just like not how we necessarily consider them. And there are some that I definitely wouldn't count as like books, right?
Yeah.
But like, I listen to the same type of nonfiction that I would otherwise read, which is just like, investigative journalism, like that type of thing. It's all nonfiction. I don't listen to any fiction podcast either. Um, so I'm like, hello?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of perspective, right? Like there's a lot of people who would even argue that people shouldn't be counting audiobooks towards their reading
Yeah.
goal or graphic novels towards their reading goals and things like that. And I think it's just a matter of allowing yourself to have the grace of going, that number feels low because I'm only seeing one portion of what I'm taking in as content. If
Yeah.
we're talking about published books, I've only read 39 only, which
Yeah.
for a lot of people is insane.
Is a
Like there's
lot.
people who don't read a single book all year. So like
Yeah.
don't even take that as like anything to like really like be upset about. I think the thing with our goals, and both of us are with this one, that this is kind of like a throwaway goal. It's not one that we care all that much
Yeah.
about anyway. So not that it matters, but it's there. And then sometimes it can feel like a pressure, and it shouldn't,
Yeah.
because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Listen to your
And it
podcast. Enjoy
absolutely,
it.
I think, for a lot of people can be very beneficial. And I don't want to sound like I'm poo-pooing it.
Mm.
If it's something that helps you to like, because the goal is to read.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. As long as you are reading, congratulations, do the thing. And so if a numerical goal like this helps, but that's another reason why I think maybe I should start doing more with Storygraph. You can do more customizable goals.
Yeah.
And I think maybe we're about to get into this, but like maybe moving away from a numerical, like total goal, and maybe trying to set myself smaller, like more unique goals might be a way to go. But we can talk about that in the next segment. It's like some things that I'm thinking about.
All right. So if you didn't know, We did a reading roundtable episode back at, I think it was like January, that it
Yeah, it was our
was,
first reading roundtable of the year. Yeah.
where we brought on a couple of our friends to talk about their bookish reading resolutions, their bookish reading goals for the year, and we each brought up a thing that we were doing for that as well. I believe for me, I talked about my Rainbow TBR challenge, which was for me my way of trying to push some of my backlist books up the priority list. I just did a video where I talked about this last week or the week before, whenever this video comes out, where I was talking about how I'm seeing a lot of people doing a lot of TBR shame and needing to try and read down their physical TBR, and why I don't think you should feel ashamed about that. So if that's something that you find interesting, please go look at that video. But for me, I was talking about how, especially doing booktube, there is a pressure to be reading and talking about new books. And so a lot of the backlist books, even if I'm still very interested in them and want to read them, it kind of feels maybe not pointless, but like a waste of time when I could be reading something new and exciting that somebody would want to hear me talk about. I think TikTok has kind of changed the way that I view bookish content, because they do not care how old a book is. It can be 10, 20, 30 years old and people will still pick up a book from them, and make it popular again. So I've been trying to read more of my backlist. For me, I have so many back here. I have so many books that I've constrained myself to try and read books by color. So each month I pick a color and I try to read 3 books from that color in my backlist. According to my tracker on Storygraph, am 50% of the way through that, although I don't know if I've updated it recently. It looks like I am missing some orange books, which I knew. That was March, and March is traditionally a rough reading month for me. Storygraph tells me those tracking things. I usually start the year off really good, and then I hit a slump end of February, March time, when the seasonal affective disorder really hits hard. So I'm missing a couple orange books, which I will have to try and make up. I'm missing one yellow book, so that was me sort of coming out of that slump. And then I didn't read any dark blue books last month for August, which is bad. Indigo was last month's color. So I'm a little bit behind. I'm about six books behind on that challenge, but honestly, for a 3 book a month goal, that's 2 months behind on it. I'm taking that as a win for me, because sometimes I really struggle to read, and honestly, the goal was to read more of my backlist books, and I've done that, because I have read a bunch of backlist books this year, and I've enjoyed most of them. Like, most of the ones that I've picked up, I've rated 5 stars, and I'm glad that I've picked them up. It's made me super happy. I enjoy this. It's just a fun challenge, and while I know not everyone gets like reading by color in the same way that they don't understand like organizing your books on your shelves by color, like that's, I could never. It's just a fun visual way to do it for me. I get it, I understand why other people don't like it. I just like it. It makes me happy, so I'm doing it, and that's the important part. It makes me happy. It has me reading my backlist. I'm counting it successful, even if I don't like 100% nail the goal overall.
I love it for you. I do not love it for me.
Well, don't do it then.
I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna. I also I don't think I could pull, like, I don't have the shelving for
Yeah.
it. Or like the number of physical books,
Yeah.
honestly. So in our reading roundtable, the thing that I said that I wanted to do was to try to read more fantasy. So for longtime listeners, you may know that when the channel originally started, 7 years ago, I predominantly read young adult fantasy. I took a hard turn kind of out of that when I transitioned to reading like adult books. And I think my problem with a lot of that is that I'm not a high fantasy person. Um, and so a lot of adult fantasy, I was just like, this is like way more involved than I wanted to be. Like, I'm just not this person. Not that there isn't good like adult fantasy out there. I just like, instead of like kind of picking and choosing my books, I just took like a extreme turn, and I hit adult romance instead. typically contemporary romance, but I do like, some, your fae, your, some fantasy romance, but I just read contemporary more. Um, and I think that turn has kind of like coincided with some turns in my own life where I just became interested in some different things. And one of the things that I love about contemporary fantasy is, or contemporary romance, is like thinking about like relationships, um and not necessarily just like the people who are in love in the books, but also I think a lot of contemporary fantasy these days is really focused on like family and friends, and just there's a lot going on in contemporary romance of today that really interests me, in a very interesting way. But I miss fantasy. And so I really wanted to get back and do a little bit more of that. So if you watched our mid-year book freakout tag, there was one book in my side of the tag that appeared twice, and it also appeared on Michaela's, but it appeared twice for me because I love it so much, and that was Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. Now, I did not choose to read that. We mutually chose to read that, for a video for the blog. Um, but I had so much fun with that. I loved that book. And that was exactly like the cozy fantasy, like they're doing some traveling, but also they're hiding some bodies vibe that I wanted. Um, and so I wish I had kind of been able to like use that as a springboard into other stuff. Um, but for those who maybe saw my life update or otherwise don't know, I did my dissertation data collection this spring, kind of last minute. It wasn't meant to fit into that schedule. Um, and I've been riding a really, really rough couple months of burnout from that. Um, so trying to like this was maybe not the year to try to grab back into um, a fantasy world, which even if it isn't high fantasy, requires like understanding a world, a magic system, whatever. And my brain was like, I am so tired. Um, so I'm still really sad about it, but I also don't want to force myself into doing something that when I'm already struggling reading so much. Because, like, full disclosure, this video was supposed to appear in 2 weeks and there was supposed to be a review today, but I literally cannot read the book that we have chosen, because my brain is just sludge. So, this still is like a goal for me, like personally. I just also think talking about like random markers of time, right? Maybe the year 2025 is just not the way that I should be thinking about it. Um, Michaela and I are going to talk a little bit in a minute about our buddy reading challenge and the amount of thought that we put into that. But thinking about that and thinking about this has made me think about maybe the next time that I set some reading challenges, like I was saying, because you can do like unique challenges on Storygraph. We should have been sponsored for this video. Um, you know, thinking about my reading more of like, I'd like to read 5 fantasy books. I'd like to read, just to make sure that I'm reading also more diversely for myself, um, rather than just being like, oh, I'm just going to read another book on Richard Nixon. um, so yeah, maybe that's a way that I approach it later and makes it feel less amorphous, right? There's like a tangible goal, a small one that's achievable. And then if I read more than that number, great, fantastic. But uh yeah. This whole video is gonna be me being, well, I tried and then I failed. So if that's you, I see you. We're in it together.
Yeah, going against type once more. I don't know if I mentioned it in that reading roundtable video. I may have mentioned it offhand, but I did also make like a reading resolutions video for myself for the year back at the beginning of the year, and in that I talked about how I pick up a bunch of nonfiction, but I tend not to read very many. Like usually it's like one, maybe two a year at max. So I set myself
When I make you.
what yeah, usually when Gretchen makes me, I will pick up a memoir on my own every once in a while. Like that I'm not I do that. I do read memoirs every once in a while. Um but like I have way more nonfiction books behind me than I physically read. So I set myself the goal to try and read one nonfiction book a month. Um, I just counted. I have read 7 out of the 8 nonfiction books I'm supposed to read up to this point. So I'm like pretty much on track for that. I'm a little bit behind. I need to read like one extra nonfiction book, which honestly, again, I'm counting that as a win for me. I think it's still achievable by the end of the year for sure. I have been enjoying that. I do still think that I'm just like a mainly fiction reader myself. Like I don't think that reading like I know some people try to have like a 50-50 split and that's just never going to be me. I'm just a more enjoyable when I read fiction books. I just enjoy myself more. I enjoy learning and I do like picking up a nonfiction book every once in a while, but I don't think that I need to read more than that, honestly, or like force myself to read more than that. And there's no inherent like advantage or disadvantage to reading one or the other. I think it's just a personal preference thing. I think it was just again for me just a thing where I wasn't picking up books that I was buying because I was interested in the topic, and I do like listening to people do deep dives into certain things. I've read a bunch of nonfiction on horror in the last year, which is super fun and interesting for me. I like listening to people talk about like the analytics around horror and what makes it important to them. I've realized that I really enjoy essays, both like personal essay style and a more analytical, maybe. I don't know what the right form of that is, but it was an area that I don't think that I've explored a whole lot before this, and so that was a fun thing. I doubled down on I really don't love personal growth books. I don't enjoy reading them. They don't make me feel good or empowered or whatever they're supposed to do. They just feel kind of patronizing to me. I will also say I'm not uh usually a big history person, unlike Gretchen. Gretchen loves her history, but I do like a social justice or a sociology book, so those are usually a little bit better for me. Um, but yeah, it's been me trying a bunch of different nonfiction and figuring out sort of what I like in there. Um, which I think again, I'm gonna count that as me at least being on track or feeling like that was pretty much successful for this year. But again, I've been unemployed, so I've got nothing else to do. I've got nothing else to do but try all this fun stuff and see what I like and see how it's going. So, yeah, I think I'm doing all right in this one.
So, as I mentioned, alluded to, you've seen us talk about throughout the year of the channel. If this is your first video for us, hi. But anyway, every single year, Michaela and I do a buddy reading challenge, and there are 10 prompts every year. And we do it to make sure that there's betwixt content, right? But also do it to try to push each other and ourselves. So we try to make sure that it's not like super weighted with one thing someone's gonna like more than the other. Because Michaela and I like a lot of similar things, um, but we also have some clear differences. And sometimes I think that that is more of like we like really really strong characters, but we don't like the same genres all the time, like stuff like that. So it can be really fun to bob and weave between things, because that's when the really good conversation happens. And one thing that we've tried to do every single year is to make sure that it also means that we're reading diversely. And that can mean diversity in a number of different ways. And this year, I think we've done this enough years in a row now where we were able to take stock of the way that we had constructed this challenge in the past and be like, okay, how can we keep pushing? And so one of the examples is that we always, not always, but we have tended to have read a translated book on there. I think almost always, But we realized that all of the books that we had read for that challenge were predominantly Asian authors, so Asian works that were translated. And so this year we just tightened that category a little bit more, to make sure that we wouldn't be reading another Asian book. Not that there's anything wrong with them. We've loved many of those books. There was one that we both felt really hated as well, which is a great video.
Mm.
But again, if the point of this is to make sure that we're reading diversely, again, is to really drill down into, okay, but like just because you said a translated book, you can go a little bit deeper. And so whatever that means for you, especially if you do use some sort of tracking software, to really dig in and see, where can I push myself to be better, which has been really, really fun this year. We've read some and will read, I promise, eventually, some really random things. Another thing this year that's kind of changed the buddy reading challenge is that we have incorporated a lot of them into our reading roundtables, which is a feature that's been around now for about a year. But this was our first full year of having the reading roundtable around, so we could plan more for that when we made our buddy reading challenge. Because sometimes, some years, the reasons that we have difficulty completing it is we can't find one book that meets the challenge that we both want to read, because that's just not where our brain is at the moment, and then we just run out of time. I'm going to go over these really briefly. So one of them was to read and review an arc on time. We did that. Proud of us. We did that super early because Katie Robert releases books like clockwork. We both like her books, and we got that done. One of the things that we did as a reading roundtable was to read a book meant to help replace an author that you've personally canceled, which basically meant that instead of like talking about how unfortunately none of us can ever read American Gods again, to find an author who we can promote, right? To replace that person rather than, taking it the negative way. And we all picked our own books for that and chose an author for that. And it was really awesome. We had read a monster romance on here, which was wonderful. We did that as a reading roundtable too, and that one was pure chaos. Highly recommend just for the shenanigans that occurred. We have counted this one as complete. So read a nonfiction book from or about a modern country facing conflict. So again, this is one where we always have some sort of nonfiction prompt on here, but we realized that we had always chosen one based in American history. Obviously, there's a lot to unpack in American history. There's a lot of things we don't know. That's why I read so much of that. But again, I knew I would already be doing that. So for our buddy reading challenge, we chose something from a different country. We ended up reading One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against this. And that book maybe wasn't as aligned with how we originally saw the challenge, but it was such a good book that we had to review it and talk about it. We had a queer historical romance. So again, we like to have a queer romance on here. We pushed into historical romance, and we did A Lady for a Duke, which is a trans historical romance, which was really lovely. A book that reminds you of your childhood, we did as a reading roundtable. I read a graphic novel. Talk about reading widely. What am I doing? What was happening? I never read those. Michaela's going to talk in a minute here about some of the ones we have plans for, but I just want to mention that we usually have 2 bonus challenges in case you are following along on Storygraph and you're like, that's 12, not 10. We have had this bonus challenge. I don't know how many years now we've carried this one forward, but to read a book recommended by a favorite author and then to like do kind of like a swaps video. We talked about it. I think we are really on pace, and you'll see this in a minute, to finish this entire challenge for the first time ever, but it may be minus the bonus ones. Check back in December when we know.
So like Gretchen said, we are pretty much on track to complete this. We've done 6 out of 10 challenges, and of those remaining 4, we have video plans and books picked for all of them. Um, she mentioned it earlier, but the translated one, we had decided to pick a translated text from part of the world considered part of the global south because they get less representation overall. We have a book picked for that. It just has a really long hold list at the library for Gretchen. I have a physical copy of it here because I'm me and I pick up translated texts when I see them and I'm excited about them. So that one will be coming up. It's just dependent on when that hold comes through the library. Um, the next one we haven't done yet is to read an Indigenous fiction book, and that we have chosen as a reading roundtable prompt for November. The next one on the list is to read a feminist text. I have already read this one. Gretchen has it from the library. She just has to read it. Her brain wasn't being nice to her. We were supposed to film that one today, but we've pushed it to the next video and we've just swapped them. So hopefully that will be coming out this month and you have that to look forward to. We will be talking about sour cherry. So if you are interested in that, look forward to that. And then the last one is our very next reading roundtable, which will be coming out at the beginning of October, which is to read a middle grade novel found on a banned book list. We're celebrating Banned Book Week, which is usually in September. This was initially supposed to come out in September, but for whatever reason this year it seems like Banned Book Week is the first week of October this year. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, especially in the current political climate in America. There's discussions being had about the ways that government is constraining what libraries are able to have, depending on what state you live in. And yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about that, and we're all going to read children's, middle grade, or teen. We opened up to our guests because we ourselves would like to read middle grades, but they can read any children's book that's banned or challenged to celebrate that. So we do have plans for all of those. That would be our 10 main challenges. But like Gretchen said, those bonus challenges, they may be floating again. Who knows? We've thrown around some ideas on how we can do that in a way that is helpful. It just might be not the way we initially intended it when we devised the challenge itself.
If you have gone back and seen some of our other like challenge wrap up videos, you will know that every year there is at least one challenge that we do not complete. Um, and we talked about that in our video of like, if it is inconceivable that we can finish 10 challenges, maybe we shouldn't go with 10. And every year we have said no, 10. Um, so again, weird numbers that we just decided to commit to, but my fingers are crossed that this year proves that it is indeed possible. And I think again, a big bonus for that is the reading roundtables because we get to um, read widely in this category that we've chosen in something that's really interesting to us, and it keeps us from having to find, like we are with sour cherry right now, a time when my brain will functionally function because it's just not. But that's when, and then we drag our friends along with us and we're like, hey, Indigenous fiction. So like Michaela said, that is the only one that doesn't have a plan. And I think part of the problem, the reason that we haven't chosen books for that yet is there's too many good ones. And I feel like there's just so many that would be good to read. So if there are, as Michaela said, any Indigenous fiction books that you would be interested in hearing our thoughts on as well, either like for Michaela, because we get to pick our own books, like, oh, Michaela, I really think you should read this one, or Gretchen, I really think you should read this one. Leave those down in the comments to help us make decisions. Because it's a really good thing that the reading roundtables open it up to anything you're interested in. But if you're interested in too many things, it's also a bad thing. Because there have definitely been reading roundtables where I only make that decision like at the last second because I'm just paralyzed by choice. So give us a hand if you can think of anything there. This is also the first time that we've done a chatty video in a while. It's just the two of us. And so that was another really awesome reason to do this type of video. We love our friends, obviously, but Betwixt the books is us. And so it's really fun. And so if you can think of other like maybe chatty videos that you think would be fun for us to do together. You can also maybe leave some ideas down in the comments because, again, we talk about books all the time.
Mm.
But when we think about what would make a good video, again, sometimes we're like paralyzed by the choice of it and then it just doesn't happen. So if you have any ideas, Indigenous fiction videos that you want us to see, um, let us know down in the comments. And here's hoping that this review comes out in the next couple of weeks. I really, just like generally for life reasons, really need my brain to get back on the train tracks. I'm teaching, I'm writing my dissertation, and I am screaming on the inside of my brain. So we'll see, and you will discover the answers right along with us. So we will see you in a couple of weeks for something. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.